Picture this. A woman kneeling on a hospital-clean living room floor, hands shaking, staring up at her own mother. A woman who hasn't taken a single step in 4 years, standing on her own 2 feet. That woman was me. My name is Major Elizabeth Sterling, United States Army. I have led soldiers through places most people only see on the news. I have kept my composure under fire. But nothing prepared me for the moment my mother gripped the back of her wheelchair, pulled herself upright, and whispered 4 words that changed my entire life. We need to go. Now. If you've ever felt the ground shift under a life you thought was solid, a marriage, a family, a home, stay with me. Because what I found in the next 24 hours would end one man's career, save my mother's future, and teach me a lesson about strength I will never forget. But to understand that moment, you need to go back 3 days. Back to the morning my husband kissed my forehead, rolled his suitcase to the door, and told me he had a business trip in Denver. I believed him. I always believed him. That was my first mistake. On paper, my marriage looked like a success story. Daniel and I met 9 years ago, back when I was a young lieutenant, and he was a rising IT consultant with an easy smile and an answer for everything. He was charming with my mother, patient during my long deployments, and always said the right thing at the right time. After my father passed, my mother Grace moved in with us. 2 years later, a stroke took the strength from her legs. She needed a wheelchair, daily therapy, and constant care. Daniel never once complained, at least not to my face. He'd tell her friends, family takes care of family. People admired him for it. I admired him for it. I was often away for months at a time, training soldiers, running operations, trusting that my home was steady behind me. Daniel handled the finances. Daniel handled my mother's medical paperwork. Daniel handled everything because I let him. That's the thing about trust. It's not blind. It's earned slowly over years until you stop double-checking the person you love. And once you stop checking, that's exactly when the truth has the most room to hide. Looking back now, there were small cracks. Daniel getting oddly protective of his laptop. Daniel taking calls in the garage with the door shut. Daniel suggesting, more than once, that maybe my mother would be more comfortable in a care facility somewhere with real medical staff. I brushed it off as concern. I was wrong. 3 days before that moment on the living room floor, Daniel packed for Denver. He said his company was closing a big contract and he'd be gone through the weekend. He kissed me, hugged my mother, and left. That night, my mother was unusually quiet during dinner. I asked if she was all right. She just said she was tired. The next morning, I found her in the study, a room Daniel always kept locked, telling me it held sensitive client files he wasn't allowed to share, even with me. But that day, the door was open. My mother had wheeled herself inside while I was making coffee. On the desk sat Daniel's second laptop, the one he never brought on trips. It was open, and on the screen was an email he'd forgotten to close before he left in a hurry that morning. The subject line read, "Power of Attorney, Final Draft." My stomach dropped before I even read a single word. The email was between Daniel and a lawyer I had never heard of. It laid out a plan, in cold, careful language, to have my mother declared legally incompetent, using a private doctor Daniel had already paid for a supporting evaluation so that Daniel could become her legal decision-maker while I was away on my next deployment. Underneath it were bank statements. Daniel had quietly opened a joint account tied to my mother's small pension and the modest savings my father had left her. Money had already been moving out of it a little at a time into an account under a name I didn't recognize, a woman named Renee, someone Daniel's text called the only person who really understands what I'm dealing with at home. My husband wasn't on a business trip. He was in Denver with another woman, using my deployments and my mother's condition as cover, and he was building a legal case to take control of her money and possibly move her out of our home entirely, all before I could come back to stop it. My mother, sitting beside me, had read every word. Her hands were trembling, not from illness, but from fury and fear. She looked at me and said the only thing that made sense in that moment. "He's not just leaving you, Elizabeth. He's coming for me next." That's when something in her changed. Adrenaline, pure protective instinct, and 4 years of buried strength collided at once. She gripped the wheelchair, pushed up on legs that hadn't held her in years, and stood. Her doctor would later confirm it wasn't a miracle. It was a documented, if rare, surge of nervous system response triggered by extreme fear and fight-or-flight instinct. Her body remembered how to stand because her mind refused to let her family fall. "We need to go. Now," she said. And we did. I did not scream. I did not call Daniel and confront him over the phone. In my career, I learned one hard lesson. The moment you tip off the enemy, they destroy the evidence. So instead, I got to work the way I was trained to. I moved my mother to my sister's house that same afternoon, somewhere safe and untouched by Daniel's plans. Then I called a military legal assistance officer I trusted and laid out everything: the emails, the bank transfers, the fake medical evaluation Daniel had already paid for. I learned that what Daniel was attempting had a name: financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, layered with attempted fraud through a falsified competency evaluation. That's not a messy divorce issue. That's a criminal one. Over the next 2 days, while Daniel believed he was still safely hidden in Denver, I built my case. I secured copies of every email. I got my mother's real doctor to write an updated medical statement confirming she was fully capable of making her own decisions. I contacted the bank and froze the joint account before another cent could move. And quietly, I reached out to Daniel's company's compliance department because using company travel funds to visit a personal relationship while falsifying business documents violated his own employer's policy too. I wasn't seeking revenge out of anger. I was protecting my mother, and I was going to make sure the truth came out where it could never be buried again. 6. The return. Daniel came home Sunday evening, tanned, relaxed, completely unaware. He noticed my mother wasn't in her usual spot by the window and asked where she was. "Somewhere safe," I said. "Somewhere you can't reach her." I watched the color drain from his face as I set the printed emails on the kitchen table: the power of attorney draft, the bank transfers, the messages to Renee. I told him about the frozen account. I told him his employer's compliance office already had copies of everything, including proof he'd billed a personal trip as a business expense. He tried to talk his way out of it, the same easy voice that once charmed my mother into trusting him. But there was no charm left in that room. Just the truth, laid out in his own words, from his own laptop. "You didn't just betray me," I told him. "You tried to take everything from a woman who has never done anything but love you. That's not something I forgive. That's something I stop." What followed wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, legal, and complete. Daniel's company opened a formal investigation after receiving the compliance report, and within 2 weeks, he was let go. The falsified expense claims alone were enough. The lawyer who drafted the fraudulent power of attorney faced a professional ethics review once my legal officer submitted our documentation to the state bar. The doctor who agreed to sign a fake competency evaluation for payment lost his license to practice. My mother, with her real doctor's full support, kept complete control over her own life and her own money. She began intensive physical therapy, and while she still uses her wheelchair for long distances, she can now stand and take steps on her own, something her doctors call remarkable progress, all beginning from that one moment of pure will in our living room. Daniel and I divorced within the year. He asked more than once if there was any way back. There wasn't. Some trust, once broken this deeply, cannot be repaired. It can only be replaced with something stronger. The trust one now have in myself, in my mother, and in the family we chose to protect. People often assume strength looks like the loudest voice in the room, or the person who never needs help. But I learned something different that day. Strength is a mother who hasn't walked in 4 years finding the will to stand the moment her family is threatened. Strength is choosing quiet, documented truth over rage. Strength is protecting the people who once protected you. My mother didn't stand up because of magic. She stood up because love, when it's real, refuses to stay seated while the people it protects are in danger. If someone in your life has ever surprised you with a strength you didn't know they had, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments below. And if this story moved you, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because next week I'm sharing another true story about the quiet moments that changed everything.